the Great British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. On this week's show, we will review the latest positive news from the British manufacturing sector and welcome a very special guest. Ben Morgan, the Research Director at Sheffield-based Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. But before we start, just like to mention Factory Now. New members are joining the platform every week, which has been launched to help the British manufacturing sector boost sales, collaborate and reshore. New members include Quick Grind, which is an international reputation for design, development and manufacture of solid carbide and high-speed steel cutting tools. And CNC Robotics, which uses robots and associated automation technologies to provide innovative and cost-effective solutions to machining problems and related manufacturing challenges. Stuart, welcome back to the podcast. Did you enjoy your break?
Yeah, very good, thank you. A couple of days in Anglesey and raring to go, Joe.
Brilliant. Well, there's been some good news since you've been away. Let's start with the first one. Siemens Gamesa to invest 186 million expanding their plant in Hull. Just astonishing investment.
Fantastic news. Siemens, world leader in the offshore wind industry. They're going to invest, as you say, £186 million expanding its wind turbine blade manufacturing plant in Hull. This is scheduled to be completed in 2023. The investment will more than double the size of the facility and add 200 jobs to the 1,000 strong workforce already in place. Manufacturing of other offshore wind turbine blades already in the factory's pipeline will continue while the expansion is constructed. Once completed, next generation blades will be built at the site, which will then be the largest offshore wind manufacturing facility in the UK.
Yeah, and on a similar vein, Spain's GRI, they're building actually a new facility.
Yeah, announced on the same day, GRI Renewable Industries, Spanish manufacturer of wind towers and industrial wind components for major OEMs and developers in the wind energy market, has announced plans to build a new factory in the UK. 100 offshore towers a year, equivalent to 100,000 tonnes of steel, will be initially supplied from the production facility, which will be built at the Able Marine Energy Park on the Humber. The total investment is expected to be 78 million, as you say. This will create approximately 260 direct jobs, plenty more in the supply chain as well. And the project will receive grant funding from the government's £160 million offshore wind manufacturing investment support scheme.
Yeah, two similar stories there up in the northeast, but yeah, very, very well received, as you would expect. Lotus, they've launched a manufacturing drive, quite a major one, in fact, haven't they? There's quite a lot of jobs going at the car manufacturer.
Yeah, it's unreal, what's going on with Lotus. The investment by the parent company, Geely, has been astonishing over the last few years. And this is the latest major recruitment drive launched by Lotus. 200 jobs are available. It's historic Norfolk base. New recruits will help build the recently launched Emira sports car, which I know that you talked about on GB News, Joe, and it's a fantastic car. I urge anyone to look at the videos and images of that car. It really is something else. The new sports car, its first all-new sports car for more than a decade, I believe, will be built at a new assembly plant at its Halesowen site, which is part of a wider £100 million investment in the manufacturer's UK facilities.
Stuart, I'll just take a little pause there from the positive news. I'd like to introduce this week's guest, Ben Morgan, the Research Director at Sheffield-based Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, or the AMRC. Ben, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Just before we start to talk about the AMRC, can we learn a little bit more about Ben Morgan? Who you are, your roles, your responsibilities, and your career to date?
Yeah, great. So I'm the research director, as you said, at the AMRC. So my responsibility is to make sure that the strategic direction of the research and the portfolio that we build up is appropriate to deliver business objectives. And ultimately, the AMRC is part of the Sheffield University, but it's also part of the high-value manufacturing catapult centres. So that's a network of 7 centres right across the UK. And we're here to support UK business primarily, and to do that through driving innovation, new technologies, processes, and to support skills and supply chains as well. So So that's my role. I've been at the AMRC over a decade. So I actually joined in 2008, just in the midst of the financial crisis. I had a job elsewhere. I hadn't worked a day actually at that job. I was just a fresh graduate at the time, and I was made redundant without working there, unfortunately. So I sent my CV to Professor Keith Ridgway, who's a founder at the AMRC, really kind of on spec. He invited me in for a chat, asked me if I was clever, which is always quite an interesting question to be asked to interview. I obviously blagged that reasonably well, and here I am today.
Yeah, but it's probably a blessing in disguise, wasn't it? That redundancy. You know, you've done well career to date, so well done. But can we just have an overview of the AMRC, please? Yeah,
so AMRC was set up in 2001. So it was set up with Professor Ridgway. It was his brainchild, together with a local businessman, Adrian Allen. And they were the key ingredients, really. It was bringing together academia and academic excellence. Professor Ridgway was a prof in the School of Mechanical Engineering in Sheffield at the time. And he was working very closely with local industry. But as we know in the UK, we've got a brilliant science base, and we're very, very well regarded at that fundamental science level. But we don't often turn that into commercialised opportunities and money and take good use of it. So that's what Keith wanted to do. And look, we were lucky enough, or say lucky, it was probably more hard work, but there was an element of luck that Boeing were very interested in what we were doing. So we set up the AMRC with Boeing, and it was to support their supply chain in the UK and to develop their supply chain. And since then we've grown. We're heading towards 500 staff at the AMRC. We've got a sister centre, the Nuclear AMRC, and we've got an AMRC training centre as well, apprentice training centre. And we work right across the kind of product life cycle, right through from design, concept design of products. We do component manufacture research, so in composites, in additive, in casting. We look at smart factory technologies, Industry 4, particularly through our Factory 2050 facility. We do machining. That was the foundation of the AMRC was on machining, hard to machine metals, titaniums and nickel alloys. And we do assembly and automation, and finally we do inspection, validation and test. And we've got, on-site physical testing facilities. So we will make stuff and then we will break it as well. Right across the product life cycle, quite a broad skill set.
Fascinating to hear your background and the history of the AMRC, Ben. Previous podcasts, we've talked quite a lot about sustainability, and I believe that you believe that this is one of the biggest challenges that manufacturing faces at the moment.
Yeah, I think it certainly depends on kind of the size of the manufacturer. But I think it's fairly undeniably the biggest challenge that the world faces at the moment in terms of climate change. Saw in the press yesterday, there was a temperature recorded in Sicily, which was 48.8 degrees. It was the highest temperature recorded in Europe ever. So, we've got a significant problem. If temperatures do continue to rise, and this was all highlighted in the recently released IPCC report, it really is, catastrophic. Risk to livelihoods, food security, water supply, human security, and ultimately economic growth. And I think manufacturing has lots of opportunities for manufacturing to support, driving sustainability, not only in the way we operate and operating responsibly, but designing products with a circular manner for reuse, for recycling, and to make green products and support green industries as well, which obviously the government are talking quite a lot about at the moment.
Well, fantastic. And continuing the theme, zero carbon Humber. I know it's a project that AMRC are heavily involved in. Would you mind giving us an overview of that project and its aspirations and partners and so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So Zero Carbon Humber is a project is a coalition of 12 collaborating businesses. So led by Equinor and National Grid, but we've got British Steel, Centrica, Drax, Mitsubishi, PX, SSE Thermal, Triton Power, Uniper, and the AMRC and the nuclear AMRC. So the project is ultimately to decarbonise the Humber industrial cluster by 2040, which is quite significant. There's a huge amount of carbon emissions from that region, and this is looking to develop a hydrogen pipeline from the east coast right through sort of south of the Humber estuary and then up towards Drax. And it's actually a dual pipeline. So it will supply the businesses are listed with, or a number of the businesses are listed with hydrogen, but it will also capture CO2. And we will be capturing that and then storing that in the reservoirs under the North Sea. So initially it's blue hydrogen. So blue hydrogen is where you autothermal reform natural gas. You split natural gas, but you do capture the carbon from that process, and as I say, that will go into the endurance reservoirs underneath the North Sea. But the idea is to move towards green hydrogen, which we've got a great opportunity because we've got the biggest wind farm globally in Dogger Bank. So we've got a fantastic opportunity there. If we've joined up as an East Coast cluster with Net Zero Teesside as well. And if we succeed in decarbonising both Teesside and the Humber, it's actually half of the UK industrial emissions, which is absolutely huge. So it's a really, really big opportunity. If I just touch on sort of AMRC's role, nuclear AMRC's role in this, we're really looking at the supply chain. So we're looking at anchoring as many of the jobs that can be created through this opportunity in the UK, in British business. And we're looking to support British business to do that and to win that work. So we'll be launching Fit for Hydrogen, Fit for CCUS programs, much like our sort of 10-year tried and tested Fit for Nuclear program, where we support businesses, we engage them, we work on business excellence, but then we support them with innovation and supporting them pivoting to be able to supply some of the components that are needed on the shopping list, if I can call it that, of the Zero Carbon Humber.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That is to learn all that. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure there's lots more exciting projects just around the corner, which maybe we can come on to. But if we look at the future, I guess, if we just look at the Northeast alone, it's about 20,000 jobs that have been announced in the last, 6 months or so. Clearly, we need to upskill, don't we? How do we do that? How do we bring people into this industry? Talking about STEM engagement, things like that. If we look to the future, how do we engage with the next generation of engineers and manufacturers?
Yeah, I think it's, as you say, we're going to have, and we have got a problem where we've got a big skills shortage. And if we're talking about some of these big infrastructure, green recovery programs, we are going to struggle to fill the roles that we're talking about. I mean, I think the East Coast cluster is another 25,000 jobs year on year through to 2050. So, it's big amounts of employment. I think it's a multi-phase or multi-pronged approach. I think we have, as you say, Joe, we've got to attract young kids from all manner of backgrounds into manufacturing. We've got to make it as accessible as possible. Now, we've obviously had apprenticeships in the past. They became unfashionable, and they're coming back, in quite a big way. And I think we've really got to get behind that. I think the opportunity to go into a training school at 16, be teed up with a job, be matched with a job with an employer, and be able to go through apprenticeship levels, maybe advanced apprenticeship, higher, and then on to a degree apprenticeship, come out of that 5-6 year process with a degree and no debt. It's just so important. We know how hard it is these days for young people, increasingly so through the pandemic. And so having training facilities local to where the jobs are, local to where these young people are, I think is just really important. The other thing I would say is this is about, CPD as well. And it's about being able to have appropriate training so that people can switch careers, or they can upskill and retrain to support these projects as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We talk a lot about the skills gap, don't we? But it's probably more of a training gap, isn't it, rather than a skills gap? I know the two things are closely aligned, but there was a period of time where apprenticeships weren't really apprenticeships, were they? Some of the training in the last 20 years hasn't been all that good. But I'm pleased to say that certainly the people we see, the back on seeing, trainists, people in training, they're on CNC machines, they're programming CNC machines, where there was a time where you'd be on a manual lathe for 5 years and you'd barely learn anything.
Yeah, I think, if I use an example close to us, when Boeing set up their facility in Sheffield, which is their first European manufacturing facility, 27 of the employees going into that centre were trained at the AMRC training centre, and were very quickly operating very high-end CNC equipment with Siemens 840 DSL controllers, and they were doing it in a very skilled manner. And they came in at 16, and they're still there and driving that business forward. Manufacturing aerospace parts that are being shipped back to the US. So, as you say, I think the level of training has gone up. I think what I would say is I think we've got to continually look at it, and I think the way I've certainly seen when I was recruiting into Factory 2050 in one of my old roles was that everything is going very heavily digital, and we need more so hybrid engineers that can not only prep material, fixture material, and understand the mechanical principles, but actually, create apps and write programs and APIs that interlink bits of sensor equipment and machines and dashboard and visualize data, because that is, a skill that is going to drive the fourth industrial revolution and support UK business to be really competitive.
If we look at the MRC, Ben, I know you're quite secretive up there, but what's next? What's next for the what's next for AMRC basically?
We've just gone through a process of looking at our 10-year strategy, which has been a great reflection. We've done a lot in the first 20 years of the AMRC, and really kind of was standing on shoulders of giants, I would say, in terms of kind of, the new board and the new directors that are in post. And we're really focusing on four key aspects from an outward facing manner. So sustainability is huge to us. Digitalization is huge to us. Future propulsion and decarbonisation and net zero propulsion are big. We want to support aerospace and aviation as well as land transport in the UK. And then finally, supply chain resilience and productivity. And we've seen that through COVID that supply chains have been stretched and broken, and we're seeing that a lot with various different socio-economic problems that we've got at the moment. So they're the four key focuses. I can't talk too much about some of the really big projects we've got kind of on the horizon. But yeah, it's a case of watch this space. There's some exciting potential inward investments. We've done pretty well with McLaren and Boeing and various others, and there's more on the horizon. So the future's looking optimistic.
Great to hear. Fantastic to hear, in fact. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Ben. I know you're a busy guy, but we really do appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much for having me on. My pleasure.
A huge thank you there to Ben Morgan of the AMRC. Fantastic interview, Stuart.
Absolutely. Intriguing way to end it. Can't wait to find out what the next project is. And, the AMRC, absolute blueprint for innovation centres and research centres around the UK. The likes of Boeing and McLaren and so forth being attracted to South Yorkshire, and AMRC have been instrumental in that.
Absolutely. I'm privileged to have been around AMRC, I don't know, half a dozen times or more, and it is astonishing. But let's just move on with the news. But before we do, don't forget to download the MTD MFG app. You can listen to this podcast and exclusive content. It's available from all the usual podcast houses, whether you're Android or Apple. So yeah, please do. But let's get back on with the news. Sandvik Coromant, they're going to open a new innovation centre in the West Midlands.
Yeah, great inward investment story, which I think MTD broke last night, Joe. So work has already commenced on the UK facility in Halesowen for the Swedish engineering giant. The firm, a world leading supplier of cutting services for the metal cutting industry, has been based in the Midlands town since 1958. Its site will be transformed into a new landmark UK HQ. In addition to housing the company's employees, the facility will act as a hub for manufacturing innovation, customer interactions, and this forms part of the wider Sandvik Coromant Centre Global Network. So great news for the Midlands, great news for the UK.
Yeah, and I must say that the team at Sandvik Coromant, they're such nice people. I'm so happy for them. It's a good move as well. I've been out to Sandvik and their global HQ, and I think they're just basically replicating that here in the UK. So yeah, it is. The innovation centre is going to be something else. But if we move on to Econ, they're to open a new £7 million facility in North Yorkshire. What do you know about these?
They manufacture gritters, and they're expanding the North Yorkshire operation, as you say, with a further £7 million investment in a new engineering facility near Thirst. It's a family-owned business. They actually make more than 85% of UK's winter road maintenance vehicles. But even though, like I say, not many people have come across the company, they purchased a 24-acre site at Sowerby, which is 11 miles from its Ripon headquarters. And when completed, the facility will have workshops, spray booth, brake test unit, a maintenance compound, and 18 inspection units.
Yeah, no, astonishing. Most welcome investment in North Yorkshire. I'm sure Ben would be interested to learn about that one. Condor, they've ordered new Airbus fleet-powered Rolls-Royce engines.
Yeah, we've talked about the aerospace industry a couple of times on the podcast, and it's going to take a little bit of time to come back to where it was. And obviously, Airbus opened a new facility recently in Stevenage. German airline Condor has ordered 6 Airbus A330 Neo aircraft powered by Rolls-Royce 7,000 engines. And it's this, they're upgrading their fleet, and they want to increase the efficiency and sustainability, following on the theme from what Ben was talking about. The airline will operate the aircraft on its long-haul network to the Americas, Africa, and the Caribbean when they are delivered to its base. That will start next autumn. The Trent 7000 is the 7th and latest engine to join the Trent family, which has clocked up more than 150 million engine flying hours in 26 years of operation. Condor is the latest airline to take the engine, which entered into service in 2018.
Yeah, it's good to hear about some aerospace orders. Like you say, it's been a bit quiet for reasons we well know. But I'm sure in the not too distant future, we'll be hearing about more orders for these aeroplanes, because when when we get back to normal, and it will happen, we're going to need more aeroplanes. So great news. But that's the end of this week's podcast, Stu. There's as always, there's more news on the MTD MFG website. We don't have time to cover everything, unfortunately, on this podcast. So please do download the app, take a look. Big thank you to Ben Morgan at the AMRC. As always, Stu Stewart. But our biggest thank you, as always, goes to our listeners at home. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.